Okay guys, the Shadow 27 here. I'm gonna make a very basic tutorial on how to make a Medal of Honor custom map. Now, I've made a few maps and I'm not an expert by any means. There's a lot of things I don't 100% understand, but I'm basically gonna be showing you the simple way to make a map in simplest terms, complete basic. Also, the video might cut at some point because I'm using a very free and cheap way of recording videos. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna get you with the basics here are, this is your grid. You're gonna have an overview of whatever you create on this side. Eventually you're gonna see what you're building in this right top window. And down here is where you're going to see your textures. Now this is what it should look like after you've installed Medal of Honor Radiant, and right now I'm not going to go over that, but if I get a lot of feedback that people are having trouble installing Radiant, I will direct you kind of how to set it up, I guess. Oh, nice. Anyways, moving on. For this tutorial, we're going to be going through view number 2, which you can see up here. This is the one that I prefer to use, and you can certainly play around with the other ones and see how they work for you, but this is the one we're going to be using for this video. Now, when creating a map, it's generally best when you draw stuff, you use your left click, and C is in the top right. As I draw this, this is what we've created. Now I'm moving around by holding right click down and dragging around, and I'm moving. In this view, if you hold left control and shift while you hit right click, you stop moving, but you can change your field of view. So once again, right click moves, and then to look around, I use Control, Shift, plus right click, holding them all together to look around. Now, for the grid, it's generally best to use grid number 16, 8. Use the bigger grids when making objects. If you're doing smaller details, it's okay to use 1, 2, and 4. But generally, to avoid your map getting too messy, you're going to want to use a bigger grid like 16 or 32. I usually use 16. 32 is a bit big. Now, if you want to delete an object, you don't actually press delete. You're going to press backspace. So, anyways, let's see. The next thing we'll go over is starting the basics of what you're building. So we're going to draw a rectangle here. This is going to be the floor. I'm going to make a little building eventually and kind of the surroundings of it. Nothing too complicated. I'll make a video later getting into more details, like making textures look nice and making doors and windows. Okay, so once you've made like a square like this, by left clicking over on your grid, you can unselect it by hitting escape. To select a brush, that's what these are called, you use shift plus click, left click, and escape. It's not just left clicking it, that won't do anything. So either in the window on the right, you hit shift left click, or on the grid, shift left click. Although later you're going to want to be clicking in this window, because once we have a skybox around the map, if you click over here, you're going to be moving like the roof of your entire map. And we'll get into a skybox later. So, when you're making brushes in Medal of Honor for a map, you're going to want to texture everything with a texture called caulk first. It's going to be a green and pink texture. You can find it by going up to your textures box up here. And you're going to go into common, and it's going to load your textures. Now, once you've loaded this up, you're going to say, hey look, it's caulk. It says caulk, it's green, yellow, or green, yellow, I can't think. It's green and pink like you said. If you look closely, it says blank light map, and that's not what you want to make with your map. On my early maps, it's a rookie mistake I made a lot. I textured a lot of stuff with blank light map, and this is not what you want to do. You want to scroll down, and once you've opened your textures, you scroll through the textures by holding right click and moving the mouse down. And here's the caulk that you want. So you're gonna left shift and left click together and select your brush. Then you're gonna left click the texture. Caulk, basically, when the map loads up, it doesn't get recognized by the game. So it's like if you're building something and there's one part of the building on the edge of the map that's not going to be seen, you leave it textured with caulk, and that side, when the map gets compiled, I believe how it works is it doesn't get recognized, and it makes gameplay smoother and less things have to be compiled. Now, I've not had this keep popping up before. I'll have to take a look at that later. Okay, so there's other useful textures in this common area too. One we'll get into later that you're gonna quite often use is no draw. And basically, if you're making something that's partially see-through, like a fence, I'll show you later in this video what I mean, but no draw basically is for stuff that, like a fence, you can see through part of the texture, or like if you're gonna make there's a texture of wires, something like that. We will move into building our basic room. So something I like to do to see the textures that I'm currently using, I click show in use and see we only have caulk right now, so this is the only texture that's going to show up. So basically, I'm going to make this a little bigger. We're under grid 16 now. I forgot to change that. I told you guys to change it. I'll make that a lot bigger. Okay, so now we've made a flat surface. How do you build up, down, change the height? So basically, I showed you how to move around and look around, but you can also go up and down in this view by just holding the control button and right clicking up and down. So we're gonna build a brush, and oh no, it's still at the same level. Over here on the left side of our grid, you can drag this up or down, and it moves it through space to a different height. And then you can also drag the height over here too. This can also be achieved by, notice the shape that we've made, it's a long rectangle. Look at our field of view here on the grid on the left. If I hit Control and Tab, it changes the view, and therefore you can view it from different angles. If you wanted to make it wider, you could drag it this way, you could drag it this way. This is all with the left click, mind you now. And so yeah, you just kind of play around with it, figure out which way you want to use it, whether it's the left side here, and that's how you make brushes aside from the first flat level. Okay, so after we've made a wall, we can clone this wall if we want it to, this same brush to appear again. We press the space bar and it makes a clone of what we've just created. So I'm gonna make this a little taller. And we're selecting once again with shift left click and using the left click to drag this up. Just make that even because I'm OCD of it. And we'll draw another wall over here, and we're gonna make this one a little smaller. Well, I'll make a door just on the front. Make it like a hut. left click, escape, left click, escape. We'll make the doorway a little bigger by pulling that back. And we're going to cover this, and from the bottom over here on the left click and drag up. And there we go. Let's see how tall that is. I'm changing view with Control and Tab. See? This is the front view. And you can measure a bit by dragging other brushes around. I can tell it's about 144. That's roughly tall enough for a normal door. You can tweak it a bit to what you like. I usually like to make doors so people can walk through them and have a little room to even jump through them, so they're not too tight. But now we have a basic looking hut. So, texturing the hut. The first thing you're going to want to do, first thing, you can either go here and type what you're looking for, kind of, which I'll explain why it's kind of. And over here you could also go to whatever section that you feel you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for textures for the desert, so you go to Algiers or something more like from France, Central Europe. We'll do something Central Europe-y. I'm actually kind of looking for bricks, so I might go to the industrial section of textures. And we will wait a minute because my computer is kind of a potato. Okay, so you can see by right-clicking and dragging we have some new textures over here. I guess I'll pick one from this section. We have some nice bricks here. Let's just make it one of these. Now, obviously I showed you last time when we made caulk that if you shift and left click, you can select an entire brush and it will be textured if I left click on this brick texture. Now this is not ideally what you want to do because there's going to be faces. For example, if we go over here, we can see the lines through here. This is not going to be shown, but it's going to get textured if we left click this. To make your map more efficient when it's compiling and rendering, what we can do is escape, and instead of shift clicking, shift and left click to get the whole brush, we can control shift and left click and it only selects this face. So when I click this texture here and hit escape, this texture is now only on one side of the brush. If we go inside the hut, there's no texture here. So I'm going to go around and we're going to make the entire outside of this hut, here will not lag, we're going to make it all this brick texture, and we'll do a different texture for inside the hut. So now the whole outside is one brick, and we go inside, we're going to shift control left click, and we'll make the inside brick texture. Let's pick something for... See, when I talked about no draw earlier, these are the textures I was talking about in the game, the wood. But we're getting a little off track. I guess I'll show you an example of that later. Oh, come on, give me a good texture here. I guess I could have just went with those bricks up here. Okay, so we'll go with these bricks. Now we have two different textures, both the... Where'd my thing go? For both inside and outside. Okay, so let's select something for the floor. Now I've showed you how to find textures by going over to the textures bar, and once you're in here you can click this up button and you'll get your whole list again. But you can also find textures by typing stuff in this description bar. Let's say we want something made of wood. And I hit enter. It's loading a bunch of wood textures. Okay, so we have our wood textures now as we selected in the top left corner. I will pick this one for the floor. So looking down, I'm using Control, Shift, and right click, and I'm looking down. And now I use Control, Shift, and left click, and now the floor is wood. In fact, everything is wood because I decided to make the entire outside of the map the floor. So we're going to fix that. And I'm going to make a roof while I'm at it. So, simplifying things again, I'm going to go to Textures, Show and Use. And this is what we've used so far for our little hut. And I'm going to build the roof now with caulk. And so, as it built where I last had it on the floor, we can drag this up. We'll use the side view actually, because it's probably a lot easier. And we'll make the inside roof. We'll pick something new. We'll go back to wood. And let's select something nice. This doesn't fit at all, but I'll pick this because it's just fancy. Okay. Now, we'll go to Textures, Show and Use, and now a little more complex. So we're going to click caulk, we're going to go on the roof. I usually just select something near it, and then I draw around it. So there's a few ways you can make a roof. I'm not entirely sure which one's the best. It's up to preference. You can mess around and see what you like. But what I do sometimes is I drag a block across, I make 2 blocks, and I use the cut tool. And how you use the cut tool is that you press X and you select a point, then you select another point, and it cuts the brush. Now that didn't cut right, so I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to try again, starting on this side and then going to this side, and bam, we kind of have a better looking shape here. It's cut the right way. Now ideally, generally like to make the roofs hollow. At least that's how I would do it. So we'll cut those up, escape, select the brush with shift and click, press X, click point, and hit enter. Now also, if you want to make a cut but you don't want to delete what you're doing, you can press X, and then click, and it'll cut. Now before you hit enter, if you hit shift enter, it makes your cut, but it also leaves the portion that you don't want to get rid of. So I'm going to delete it anyways. But you can also kind of make a roof by, if you were to draw a brush over here, and if you hit control and left click with the mouse, you can kind of bend stuff around, and you could do the same thing essentially, but notice the ends are a little different. So I don't always make roofs like that, but that's just one basic way. And so I will finish this roof by first, I'll make the ends of the roof first. So we're gonna cover the triangle here, and we're gonna draw it to one. My computer would not freeze again. Or maybe it didn't freeze, I'm just dumb. Okay, so we got one side covered. We'll go back to this view. Click, enter. Remember the cut tools with X. And simplifying lessons we've already learned. Clone this and drag it to the other side. And escape. And I can control click. And bam! Now it's more of a house instead of a hut. And we will go to wood. And we will give it a nice texture for a roof. Now there's obviously you can do with the textures. You can make them more like HD, you can rotate them, you can change their appearance, and I can get that into a later video. For now we'll just do the basics and this roof blue. Now obviously you could do something nice with the trim here. Maybe give that a different wood texture. It's all up to personal preference, but now we have the basic building. Oops, that's the back of it. We'll go around. Getting a little laggy here. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is get into details. Okay, so obviously we have our house here. The next thing we're going to get into is structural versus detailed brushes. Now, when you're making a map, you've noticed everything we've drawn so far here on the grid, it's in black. And that means it's a structural brush. If you shift and right click it, you can see make the options for, you can change it if you want to make it a detail or a structural thing. Structural means that essentially if it's a sealed off area, the things I believe around it don't render. I don't have 100% understanding on this. I've got a lot of my information from the good people at the AAAA website and XNull. But it's kind of like, if I was going to make, which we're going to do right now, we're going to make a door frame. Stuff that's not essentially blocking a player's view of what's behind it doesn't need to be detail. It's kind of complex how I'm explaining it, but as I build it, I'll try to make it a lot simpler because I've just kind of rambled for a few minutes on this. So we'll get into making the door frame right now. Now for making a door frame, which is a detail, I'm going to go into a bit of a smaller grid. We'll go into 8, and we can scroll in and out over here. And we'll make a side here. We're going to make it really nice. We're going to cut it with the cut tool. Once again, that button is X. And all of a sudden we have a door frame. Now to make this a detail, we shift and click it, left click, shift left click, shift left click, and now once all of them are selected, we're going to hit Control, Shift, and D. And now you've noticed on your grid, it is now green. So basically you can now tell if you've made something a detail by pressing Control D, and it disappears because you've selected the filter over. You can select filters up in the view section, but the quick way of doing one for detail is Control D. And basically this is one example of something you would make a detail on your map. Another thing, for example, let's say you wanted to make something like, we'll make a radio in this room. So we're going to go back to grid 16. This, we'll say this is some kind of fancy radio here. So for radio texture, I might look up metal, and we'll see what pops up. Okay, so for our metal textures that have now appeared, we can scroll through them, and let's see if I can find something that looks like a radio or some kind of form of technology that would be a detail. I have something in mind. I'll see if I can find it. Ah, this will do. It looks like a control panel. So, well, yeah, see, I knew they were right around here. So I've selected one face and I'll left click it. Now, getting kind of in an advanced section of texturing, if I hit Control and F, it fits it. Now obviously, because this is tall and the texture is wide, it doesn't look right. But just for this example, I'm gonna leave it like this. We're gonna just assume this is a really cool looking radio. Now once we've textured everything on it that we see fit, we're gonna select the whole thing and hit Control Shift and D, and we've made it a detail now. And maybe you're getting a bit of a better picture on what kinds of things would be a detail and or a structural thing. See, stuff like walls, floors, that kind of stuff is structural, whereas inside a frame, door frame or a window frame that we made, or any other kind of creation, that would be a detail. And let's give our door frame something nice for a texture. Okay, so now we've given our door frame a concrete texture, and we're gonna move on to building the outside of the house. So we're gonna just build some grass around here. So I'll select something at the level of the floor, and we'll just, this map's not gonna be large, just basic map. I hope my rambling hasn't distracted from the details. I've obviously never really made a video like this before, but hopefully I can clear some things up for you guys. Okay, so let's give that something like grass. After we do the grass here, we're going to move on to another concept, which is going to be the skybox, which is basically the things you see outside of the map, the sky, and your skybox is gonna basically keep it so players can't get outside of the map, because as you can see around this house here, it's the gray void, and if people fall off of your map, it's gonna crash your server or your game. So the best there is to eventually seal off the entire map, whether you do it in a cube. Bigger maps you probably shouldn't do a cube, but on smaller ones it could work. Like here, I'll just show you for example. So now that we've made grass, and you don't want to leave holes in your map, that's another no-no. So I'll go to my textures and use, select cock, zoom in, and we've covered that up nicely now. So for a skybox, what you're going to want to do is, now that this is just the basics of what we're going to make, we have our little house, we're going to select something on a grid that's much larger, like we'll do 128, and you're going to want to make it in caulk, not concrete like I just did. And I like to, once I've made this large thing on a high grid, like 128, I go back down to 16, and I drag it down and I make it like only 16 large. So I could, I guess you could do it in 16. It just depends on how big your map is, because if you haven't like done your skybox yet and your map's pretty big, you're gonna want to use something like 128. So I'm just basically making a cube around the map in some, and once you've done that, you will select a texture of a sky. Now, for people who use Spearhead and Breakthrough, you want to be careful, because if you pick a sky from Spearhead or Breakthrough, you're not going to be able to see it in Allied Assault, and you're going to get a texture glitch, and it's going to look really ugly and yellow and white in the game. So we're going to use a basic sky that should be in all 3 Medal of Honor games. So we're going to go to Textures, and let's see, I believe it's in an area called Sky, so we're going to click and go down here. Yep, Sky. So we'll see what we got here. I'm going to probably use the sky that shows up on southern France. So it should be called Medal of Honor Day. Yep, if you can kind of recognize it. I'm going to select all the faces, but only this side. So we're using Control, Shift, and left click. And we're going to select Medal of Honor Day. Now if I go outside the box, you can see it's still cock. And your skybox is something that you want to leave structural. You don't want to make that a detail. So the next thing we're going to get into is the lighting, because if you load up the map right now, first of all, you're not going to be able to load up the map right now because we haven't gotten to make it spawn yet, which is important. But you're going to want to make the map brighter, and you can do that by clicking a brush. You're going to open the entity window, which is with the N button. And here you're going to later be able to do a lot of things. I'm just going to show you the basics at the moment. The most important thing, I think, by far, is doing ambient light. So ambient light in the key value here, and you can mess around with which setting you want. We're gonna make it so it's kind of bright. We're gonna make it 50, 50, 50. You can change these values. I'm not entirely sure. I think these are red, green, blue values. It changes the color of your light or the level of brightness on your map. You can mess around with it. We're going to make it 50, 50, 50. And when you're done, you hit enter. And another important thing, this is critical if you're not making a map with sunlight, you want to, in the key value, type sun flare name none. Now, if you want a sun, ignore this. Like the sunshine, you know what I'm talking about if you've seen it in a Medal of Honor map. But if you don't want it, this prevents it from when you're doing a list of custom maps and the map before it has a sun, and then you load up your map after it and suddenly you have a sun in the sky and you didn't want one, because that's a bug in Medal of Honor where if you load a map that has a sun and the next map doesn't have this setting set, you get a sun in the sky even if you didn't want one. So sun flare name none. We don't want a sun at the moment. Now later in a more advanced tutorial you can get into stuff. There's key values that are called sun direction, sun color, and the values are all 3 digits, and obviously we're not using a sun, so we're not going to get into that right now, but this is just the bare bones basic, I don't even know if that's a phrase, I'm just kind of rambling again, but we're making a very simple map, and we're going to make a spawn now. So in front of the house, to make a spawn, you right click, you go down to this tab that says info, and you click player, and you click start. This is basically when you're in spectator and you join the map, that's where you're first going to be like, bam, first thing you see. And so if you want to do team spawns, you probably saw in my window. If you go to the same thing under right click, info, player, you can do an allied spawn over here. You could do the same thing and do an axis spawn on the other side. You can even select spawns for free-for-all, which I would highly encourage. You put all of these spawns on your map, even if you're not planning on doing free-for-all. When you make your map, do see how it says deathmatch? Aside from allied and axis spawns, put some of these around the map so that people who want to play free-for-all have the option. But yeah, those are how you get players onto the map. And now we will look at more lighting settings. So for lighting, we've already done the stuff for the sky where you could change the sun color, the overall color of the map. But let's say we wanted it a little bit brighter inside our little hut here. So we're going to right click and we're going to click this light button, and suddenly we have this little glowing light here. And we can drag it around, kind of position it where we want it. Now, things with this light through the entity window. For one, if we type the word light into the key value, that's both of them, the key and the value, we can change the size of it by picking a number. Say we want a really small light, make it 50. No, I want my light a little bigger. Well, we can change the number, make it 150. Hit enter. Light gets bigger. Another value you can enter in here is color. And let's see, just put some random numbers in here. You'll see the light gets a little bit yellower. If you look closely, the light's a little yellower. I'll spawn a new one just so you can see the difference between what the basic light looks like and when you change the color of like what we just did. See, this one is the just spawned one. This is the one we changed some of the values on. So that's the basics. Show you loading up the game now what your map's gonna look like, but this is just the very basics on making a map that doesn't have a ton of problems. Another thing, some tips I'll kind of go over now. When you're making a map, you don't want stuff overlapping. It looks ugly in the game. So like, for example, you notice all my walls are apart from each other. If you make walls that kind of cross over each other, you can already see it in the editor. This is what it's going to look like in the game. It's going to be like flashing and kind of glitchy. You can't, I guess when you unselect it, you can't see it. But in the game, it's definitely noticeable. And that's why you don't want to use grids like 1 to build stuff, because once you use grids at level 1, which are super tiny, things can kind of, it's all messed up. And I'm building with Sky. So something else I do, a tip might be useful for you guys, is until you're done, maybe there's a texture that you found you like and you're not sure you want to use. Sometimes over in the corner of my map I like to leave a little cube like this, and if I see a texture I like as I'm scrolling through something else, like it's just a coincidence that I saw it and I liked it, I just make one side of it like this, because obviously I stay in the show and use tab. I think it's just cleaner overall. It gets messy over with your textures if you leave it. I use the same textures over and over again, so I just put that over in the corner. You don't have to, just a tip. I'll try, maybe I'll post a link below on structural versus detail, because basically that's another thing I should probably go into right now, is the thing you could here maybe make like the roof a detail. I'm not deleting it, by the way. I'm using Control D to filter things out. And what you would do, notice, I should have gone over this earlier. This is important. When we're going to go back into what is the commons section, and there's something else, there's another texture you're really going to use, and that is, it's called hint. It's purple. So I'm going to cover my doorway now. Now you don't see my frame anymore because I've filtered out details. If I hit Control D, they come back. They aren't actually gone in game, it's just showing you, for example, because I think the game ignores details kind of when it's loading up or something. Or no, it's like when you're in the game and you're looking around. I don't obviously have an expert knowledge on this, it's just one of the things that you're kind of taught to do. So we're going to get rid of the frame real quick, and we're going to put this hint thing over this hole. And essentially, I think what it does is it prevents if you go in here and you have other stuff outside of your hut, it's like the lines, I forget what they're called. It's like when you're in the game, you can do show tries and you can see the white lines of the other objects, and it's like when you have a sealed off room, the other stuff doesn't all load for your computer, making it slower for you. It improves the FPS, and you want to leave your hint as structural. So now what's inside the cube doesn't get rendered when you're outside, and when you're inside, it's like a sealed off area. That's what structural things do. You don't want too many structural things because when you're compiling your map, it'll exceed the limit for what you can do. So that's why, and you don't want to make your whole map detail either. It's just you want to have a good balance, and you can see me filtering through that again. So I'm going to load up the game and I will show you what we have done so far in the game. So I kind of lied. I actually forgot something very important, which is to save our map and compile it. So we're going to save this map and we will call it the Great Test Map. And it saves as a map file. And we're going to want to compile it eventually. So we're going to save it. And now we're going to go into, we're going to see my wonderful background. Photoshop GIMP Mastermind. We're going to go into a program called mBuilder, which you're going to want to download with Radiant. Now basically, this is where you compile the maps. I'm going to hit refresh maps. I'm going to scroll through. We're going to find the Great Test Map. Here we go. Now, when you're not completely done with the map, you can have settings over here that are on fast. I wouldn't recommend this for the final version of your map because it does usually leave black scorch marks and some errors, and it doesn't look as good. And there's other settings you can change. I think one of them, maybe for light, it's like final. Yeah. Some of like final, you can tweak around with those, but some of them are better than other ones, obviously. So once you're ready, you can do other options too. Like select if your map's team deathmatch. If your compile, you want to see what's going on in the command line or not. I usually just let the whole thing roll on its own. So you hit build map, and basically what it's doing, if you've properly set up your Medal of Honor folder, it's making a BSP file along with a few other files that are essential for your map, and it's putting it in your main folder. I'll do another video eventually on how, if you're gonna, the final step once you've got everything the way you want it, you've finally compiled your map, you want to put your map into a PK3 file. And so once you have it in your PK3 file, it's good to distribute. I'll make a video on how to kind of set that stuff up. Once I've said it throughout the whole video, I'm kind of an amateur on this thing. I'm not great at how-to, so I'm trying to show you as I go kind of how I make these things. Okay, so now we're in game. We're going to take a look at what we built. I usually do this over on the LAN side. And we built the Great Test Map. Let's take a look at how it Okay, so we've loaded up our map, And this is the final product. This is what we've got. Great test map. And because we've made spawns, can't see my skins. That's another thing. You take your skins out when you're making a map. Don't leave custom skins inside your game folder, or you will have problems. And I should have probably said that at the beginning of the thing. In fact, you won't have problems. You won't even make a map because it won't compile if you have custom skins in there. But you can see how we added our little extra light. It's a little brighter in here. And yeah, this is your basic map. Best of luck to you guys as you build bigger and better things. And I know I kind of rambled and got off topic. Not great at how-tos or socializing in general, I guess. But I hope you guys can use this and build some great maps. Feel free to use communities like the AAAA website and XNull. A lot of people there who really know what they're doing. People like Smithy, I can't pronounce his name. It's like Kata, Shadow, Brian. They really know what they're doing. They can probably help you a lot more than I can, but this is just the simple aspects of building a map. I'll probably make some more videos in the future getting more in depth on these topics, but yeah, this is your basic simple map.